Week 15 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few kickers I would start this week. The first guy, Harrison Butker of the Kansas City Chiefs. So Butker, for the most part, he's been pretty solid over the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season here. Week 11 at the Chargers, 14. Week 12 versus the Rams, 14. Week 13 at Cincy, 6. And Week 14 at Denver, 11. So this week, another great matchup for the Chiefs here. And obviously, they're one of the most high-powered offenses in the league, if not the high-powered offense in the league. So this week, a great matchup for Houston. 7th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. An indoor game, which is always a plus. And I think this Kansas City team's at least going to score 35, 40 points in this one. And hopefully Butker will get more than just extra points in this game. And he's a kicker I would start this week. The next kicker I look to start this week here, Folk of the New England Patriots. And Nick Folk, he's been kicking the football good over the last few weeks here. And he's a guy, for the most part, that he's just going to go out there and get the job done. And this week in Week 15, a good matchup at the Vegas Raiders that give up the 17th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. It's an indoor game, and this Raider defense really can't stop anyone. And we've seen it time after time this season. So the last few games for Folk, Week 11 versus the Jets, 4. Week 12 at Minnesota, 15. Week 13 versus Buffalo, 4. Week 14 at Arizona, 11. And this week here, I think anywhere from 8 to 12 fantasy points is definitely a safe bet for Nick Folk to get this week. And he's definitely a kicker I would start. The next guy, Younghoe Koo of the Atlanta Falcons. So the Falcons off bye week. They got the rookie Desmond Ridder starting, which I know definitely could be a problem. And they might not even get in the red zone much. But Younghoe Koo is a great kicker, only putting up numbers. So the last few games here for him, Week 11 versus Chicago, 12. Week 12 at the Washington Commanders, 9. And Week 13 versus Pittsburgh, 14. So the last few games he's playing good football is Younghoe Koo. This is a division matchup at the Saints. Obviously another indoor game. Gives up the 4th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. And right here, Younghoe Koo, for the most part, when he's indoors, he's money in the bank this season. So this week, he's still out there in over 50% of fantasy leagues. But he's definitely a kicker I look to start on my roster this week. The next guy is Cameron Dicker of the Los Angeles Chargers. So Dicker, he's taken the kicking by range over the last few weeks here, since obviously Dustin Hopkins has gone out. And I think he lost that job. Dicker, he's going out there. He's putting up fantasy points. I know he had a bad hiccup in Week 12, but besides that, the points have been great. Week 10 at San Francisco, 12. Week 11 versus the Chiefs, 10. Week 12 at Arizona, 5. Week 13 at the Vegas Raiders, 8. And Week 14 versus Miami, 11. So this week here, I think he has another good game as Cameron Dicker. Not the best matchups versus Tennessee, but it's a home game, obviously, which is always a great thing to be indoors for kickers. So Dicker right now, still out there in a decent amount of fantasy leagues, about 40%. And a kicker who could definitely help fantasy owners. And he's a start this week, in the 5th and final kicker I have as a start this week here, Michael Badgley of the Detroit Lions. So Michael Badgley, last season, he was good with the Indianapolis Colts. Then they cut him for whatever reason. And now this season, he's caught on with the Detroit Lions. And the last few games here, playing good football. Week 12 versus Buffalo, 7. Week 13 versus Jacksonville, 19. And Week 14 versus Minnesota, 12. So this week here, I know the conditions could be bad. Could be windy, could be snowy at MetLife Stadium here. But Michael Badgley and this Lion team, if they want to win this ball game, I think they just got to take what the defense is given to them. And I think it's going to be a decent amount of field goal opportunities. I really do in this game between both these teams. I know the Lions have been a powerhouse at home this season, but this year on the road, only 2 games with 20 or more points scored by this Lion team. So right here, I think Badgley's going to be busy 2 or 3 times, at least in this one, kicking a field goal opportunity. And he's a kicker that's come out of nowhere over the last few weeks. So that's a few kickers I look to start for Week 15 of the fantasy football season.